What's the most scariest paranormal activity you or someone you know have ever experienced? Growing up, I absolutely hated visiting my grandparents on my dad's side. It's not that I don't like my grandparents. I just hated their house. It's an old wartime home in the old part of town. The same house my dad and all of his siblings grew up in when they moved to Canada. Two-story house with just the main floor and a basement. I hated going in the basement for obvious reasons, as all kids are scared of basements. Right at the top of the stairs and around the railing is the only bathroom in the house. When we would go visit them, we would be there for hours, and being only a kid, I had a very small bladder. Walking to the bathroom was the most terrifying thing for me. Every time I would walk past the railing to get to the washroom, I would physically feel hands coming from the railing and grabbing my ankles. It felt so real that most times I would jump from the kitchen doorway to the bathroom doorway just so I wouldn't feel those cold and very thin feeling hands grabbing at my ankles. As I grew up, the supernatural went further and further to the back of my mind, and I slowly forgot about it till one day. When I was 14, I went to my grandparents' house to fix some things. One of those things were to tear up the carpet around the railing and all the carpet on the stairs to replace it with tiles. I started from the bottom and worked my way up. When I got to the railing, right where I would always feel the hands, there were thin hand-like markings stained into the wood. And once again, I could feel it. All the suppressed memories come rushing back. But me, not trying to freak out, passed it off as piss marks from their Yorkie. Went on with my day and finished the work. Years later, at a family function, the supernatural came up in conversation and I brought it up. Told about everything I had felt and what I had seen. I felt silly talking about it while everyone is dead silent listening to me talk about this. Once I finished my story, I noticed a horrified look on my aunt's face. She never said anything about it till after, when we were alone. She quietly told me that she knew about it. She felt those hands, and she knew about the eerie feeling that part of the house gave off. She dealt with it her whole life growing up in that house and assured me that I wasn't crazy. Since then, I had been trying to find some information about the house from before they had moved in, but so far I haven't come across anything. There is absolutely no information on the house that would explain it. There are plenty of supernatural things I have come across in my life, and I'm sure there will be plenty more. But this one always sticks out in my mind, as it's the only one that I have physically felt and had confirmation from another person that it is very real. Have had countless experiences since I was 5. The scariest happened a little over 5 years ago. I woke up to being smothered with a pillow. When I finally pushed it off, there was a cloaked shadow figure wearing a wide-brimmed hat sitting on my abdomen, leaning in to choke me. I fought against him for a while. My husband never woke to my thrashing around or screams. Before he finally left, he said, "You already know," he stressed this word, "you are marked as his. You belong to him." For about 2 years prior to this encounter, every few months while I was in the shower, I would get a burning sensation on the outside of my right calf and find 3 bright red hot scratches, 5 to 6 inches long. It seemed like as soon as the scratches healed, I would forget about them and it would happen again. The last time I was scratched was 11, 17, 16. I can't not think about them now every time I shower. I haven't seen the figure since that night, but I see his little, maybe 3 foot tall, non-human partner assistant in my bedroom doorway. I was 16 or 17, my best friend lived in a council terrace house. He'd been living there most his life, but always said it was haunted after the previous tenant hung himself. The room now occupied by his little sister, who hated the room. She was maybe 6/7 at the time. I've always been intrigued in the supernatural, been told stories by my mum from her experience, but always tried to be open-minded that some cases may be explainable. Anyway, one day, my best friend's mum was going out for the night and his sister was sleeping at grandparents', so we would get the place to ourselves to hang out, smoke, Calaxian, and bring some girls over, etc., general teen things. So he manages to get one girl over, and he sits there making out, and me, not really wanting to be a third wheel, decide to go upstairs to chill. As I get to the top of the landing, I get a weird being watched feeling, so I decide to do a little test and sit in the middle of the landing facing the darkened sister's room. I'm just looking about when I hear paced footsteps in the loft above me, and it seems to be going back and forth. I put it down to mice or birds, but it really didn't sound like it was due to the pacing of it. I then start to see what looked like a figure sitting in a small armchair or rocking chair. There was no rocking chair or chair in the room. I squint at it to try to see it better, then get up to go confirm what I saw when I hear a whisper in my ear. I can't remember what it said exactly as I'm 32 now and told not many people, but I remember it being clear as day at the time. I quickly looked behind me out of panic, but no one was there, then back to the bedroom, and the shape was gone. I bolted downstairs to see my friend still making out with his girl, quickly grab my coat and say my goodbyes. I see my friend the next day and tell him what happened. He just laughs and says that was Raymond, but he shouldn't hurt anyone. He takes me back to his house and shows me a brick in the wall that Raymond engraved in before he died, but I put that down to anyone could have put that in the brick. I still went back to the house and didn't really experience much after that, but he eventually moved out and over time, we lost contact. First, when I was really young, no older than 3, there was a bench in my house that we still have today. One day, I saw an absolutely massive humanoid thing. He had on a long, dark blue coat that came around his ankles, only revealing his face, which was pale white. Instead of a mouth, he had 2 things that looked like twigs swinging around like a pendulum that were the same color as his coat, yet was clearly not attached, and his eyes. He had no other facial features. I know this sounds like I'm pulling it out of my butt, but I'm not. I promise on my family's life. This figure terrorized me for a long time. I don't remember how long. He would come when I went to bed, and my parents had just left the room. He never went past my door. His presence was absolutely terrifying. One day, I called my mom, and he stood at the door and showed the first movement besides his mouth. I think he ran, but it was a long time ago, so I could be wrong. I believe this to be the next day, but he came to me in broad daylight while I was in the hall between the bench mentioned earlier in my bedroom. I decided to chase him, and he made a beeline for the bench. Once we got there, he disappeared. I didn't see him for a long time. I truly thought he was gone. Then, I saw him go past my door, and I started screaming. My mom came rushing in. The thing disappeared, and I saw him never again. I explained what I was seeing to my mom, and she said she didn't see him, and she comforted me until I was asleep. That was the last time I ever saw the thing. Fast forward to 5th grade and we see the next thing that happened to me. One day near the end of the year, I went to the restroom, nothing strange. No one was in the halls, not even a janitor. As I passed by the hall's computer lab on my way back to my class, there was a freezing cold wind, and the computer lab's door slammed shut with a lot of force. I peeked in the window in the door, and there was no one in the room, and there was nothing abnormal in the room except for a paper towel, and I shrugged that off. Nothing happened with that since. I joined the Boy Scouts in the 6th grade, and one of the older boys took me in under his wing, and he was doing his Eagle project when I was in 7th grade. Since he'd been a great friend to me, I had to help him. I was there with 2 other people my age, and since he wasn't supposed to do anything but lead the people working for him, me and the people my age were put in a group, and we decided to take a bathroom break. The project's location was a VFA, which was empty at the time. There was only 3 people in the building, we made sure of that. One of us was in the restroom, which had only one entrance, while me and the other guy were standing by the entrance to wait on the 3rd person. Suddenly, there was a single piano note, specifically middle C. Only me and the guy I was standing with heard this, so we went to investigate. The piano's middle C was stuck, almost as if it had been glued down. We both tried to lift it to no avail. The guy in the bathroom came out, and we asked him if he heard the note because it was pretty loud. He said he didn't. We promptly got out of the building and never went back in. No one else, not even the other people at the place, heard the note again. My final one is quite strange, as it only seemed like half an illusion. Me and my dad were going downtown later in my 7th grade year because my favorite restaurant was closing down and we wanted one last meal there. There's an intersection on the way there that leads to a power plant. A truck with a flatbed trailer was pulling out of the power plant and we thought nothing of it. That is, until the trailer went off of the road and straight up disappeared. As the truck drove past, we saw nothing even indicating there was ever a trailer attached to the truck. The trailer wasn't in the ditch beside the road either. I've had a few weird experiences, but nothing super definitive. To qualify, I'm on the autism spectrum, but I'm not the only person in my family to have had these kinds of experiences. 1. I'm like 7 or 8, and my family just moved into a new house. I have 7 brothers and sisters and the house is huge. But the basement floor, fully furnished, but it's like half underground due to our house being built on top of kind of in a hill. Always gave me this very bizarre feeling. I always felt like I was being watched and had a feeling of unease. I even see this thing that I'm not sure how to describe out of the corner of my eye whenever I was coming up the stairs to the main level. My family kind of thought I was full of it until my eldest brother, whose bedroom was in the basement level, woke up one night to see the figure of a young girl watching him sleep. As he got out of bed, she vanished. Him and I were the only people to experience anything like that in that basement. 2. A few years later, I'm like 13/14, my grandma, had her stomach cancer relapse. She chose not to fight it this time and just let it take her. A long, painful process of dying that took the cheerful woman who would spend her days tending her huge garden and chatting with you into a bitter, hateful woman. During her life, I'd been all over her house and never had any kind of unease. After she passed, her whole house, but specifically her garage and storage areas, gave me the same type of horrible unease I experienced as a younger child. Never felt that way when she was alive, but I could feel this watchful malice in her house after she died. Every time I was in those specific parts of her house, upstairs bedrooms and the basement floor with rooms in the garage, my fight or flight instincts kicked up hard. I couldn't bear to be in those parts of the house for long. I'm not sure if my other siblings or mom felt it. I never asked. But I sure as Flurbo did not spend any more time than strictly needed in her house after she passed. 3. The last few nights, I've woken randomly to the same feeling of horrible unease, as if something evil is about. I've never had these types of dreams before, even when I was in Afghanistan and my base was taking mortars regularly. Last night, I dreamt I was back in my mom's house and that something was trying to come up the stairs from her garage. I was trying to block the door with my back. But it blew out and something placed its hand on my back. I woke up and had the same horrible feeling of unease. I could still feel the sensation on my back, as if someone with cold hands had placed them on my back and showed me. The feeling on my back and the feeling of unease didn't start to fade until I started reading the Bible out loud. Lived in my house for like 1.5 years and never had any weird feelings or dreams like that, except for the last couple nights. Maybe all this has just been my mind playing tricks on me for years. But the instances have been so specific to locations and vastly different times in my life that it feels like there is something more to it. I used to live in a relatively small house that was said to be haunted. I think the story was a child or old lady had died decades ago. The basement always had this odd vibe that you can't explain, but you know not to go down there and never be near the downstairs door at night. It was an unfinished basement. There was a set of stairs that went up right before the kitchen. My parents and sister were in the kitchen having fun cooking, and I was messing around in the living room next to the kitchen at the stairs, playing what I would assume was Power Rangers at the time, because my life was completely Power Rangers as a kid. Something made me want to stand up and be near the front door. There I am, standing next to my front door, watching a pure white but see-through figure clearly walk down the last 3 steps, never looking at me, then turn and walk into the kitchen, but just before entering, disappearing. I say walking, but its movement was so smooth it was strange. What I remember most was being absolutely frozen, not in fear, but in awe. I could make out its height, but you could really only see from its forehead down to its waist, floating. Man, I really hoping writing this doesn't make the thing find me, because every few years, I take a drive past it and always get this weird vibe I shouldn't be. Kind of like the Amityville horror house. You see the house and just get bad vibes from it, even if you'd never known of its horror. My old business had some strangeness about it. Staff would constantly see shadows move out of the corners of their eyes, doors would open and close with no one near them. My daughter and I closing one night, heard a child scream. We look all around the building, but saw nothing. There is a daycare next door and thought maybe a kid was left behind. Another neighboring business owner asked me when the daycare started closing weekends. I told him in our 4 years there, they never opened on the weekend. He said he heard people talking there all the time. Late one Saturday night, well after closing, I did a final sweep of the bathrooms and halls to ensure no one was hiding anywhere. I shut off the bathroom lights, closed the door, and as I turned away, I heard a woman's voice directly behind say, "Sheesh." I got out of there quickly. I had 2 occasions where it felt like someone was leaning over me while I worked. Close to the end of our time there, a container flew off a shelf and hit the floor by my feet.